Well, welcome to week 2. Hey, you made it through week 1. Hopefully, you got everything submitted. If not, let me know and we can work ourselves out a deal or something like that. But if you're caught up, let's move on. So, the first thing we've got this week is we're going to actually install a hypervisor. So, the whole deal with this, we finally actually get to the meat of the class. So, in this class, we'll be using, only for a couple of labs, we'll be using VMware Workstation. So the class was written for VMware Workstation Pro 14, which was end of life at the end of 2019, but it'll still work. It'll still give you a 30-day trial, and you can still get the work you need done. So this lab and the next lab, please make sure you get those done within the trial of VMware. So, I mean, if you follow the schedule, then you'll be just fine. If you don't follow the schedule, if you end up taking it a little long, you run the risk of running out of time. So, these labs can be done in VMware Player. I can't remember exactly. Its name is like VMware Workstation Player Pro or something like that. VMware Workstation Player. So you can get this done in this software as well. It's really not that serious. But you're missing a few features. Things won't look exactly right. So when you dive into the lab and you see some of these screenshots, yeah, those won't quite match up. The install, surprisingly, does match up exactly. So except this, I think you skip it, something like that. Because it'll say something to the effect of you can use it for free for however long you want to use it. As long as you're not using it commercially, so you don't use it to make a bunch of money with. Anyway, that's pretty much the only difference that you'll really run into. Pretty much everything else is the same. What you won't get, let me see if I can find a screenshot of it, is when you run one VM at a time, maybe you can squint to see that. So VMware Workstation will allow you to just create tons of VMs and let them go across. And you can just go through, like you do in your browser, move from tab to tab to tab to see them. But VMware Workstation Pro, you have to run an entirely new instance of VMware Player to be able to run multiple VMs. I've even seen in the release notes and things like that there's a limitation to running one. You can only run one VM. That's a little misleading though, because you can launch the player again and run another VM side by side, and they can even communicate back and forth between each other. So, yeah, I did confirm that last night, just in case. Here's the deal: just in case someone has already installed VMware Workstation Pro. If you have already installed it, and there are probably a handful of you in here that already have, which means that your trial won't reset. If that's the case, come out here and get VMware Workstation Player. So just Google VMware Player. I can add this to the course if we need. I don't want to put it there because I don't want to confuse folks. Get Workstation Pro 14. That way your lab looks exactly the way that it does in this PDF, in the walkthrough. Otherwise, there'll be little differences that might confuse. So for those of you that need to go out and get the player because you've already had Workstation Pro, right here, vmware.com/products/workstation-player.html, or like I said, just Google it real quick, VMware Player. As long as you're not seeing ads, yay for me, you'll see this link. So just find the one, look here, vmware.com. Make sure, click on that, download now. There's no sign in or anything like that required for this. I'm not cool enough. I'm on a Mac, so I don't get Player. I have to do some kind of wonky trial of Fusion. So to that end, if y'all need help, if you get stuck in the middle of installation or something just doesn't make sense or anything like that, this includes Workstation Pro. Everybody in the class, if you run into an issue, please let me know. I've got a Microsoft or a Windows machine charging up behind me. I can make a quick 5-10 minute video or something like that of going through whatever we need to go through so that you see what you need to see. I don't want to leave you hanging. The PDF, though, does have really good instructions. I mean, quite literally exactly what you should see, exactly what you should click. But if for some reason that doesn't make sense, I'm happy to make another video for you or something like that. Or just work with you one-on-one. That's fine, too. So anyway, on the player, go to Downloads. And if you're on Windows, download now. I would imagine that's every single one of you. If you're crazy enough, if you're as crazy as me, you can grab the Linux one and install that on your Linux and Linux OS. I would imagine you're probably stuck to your Ubuntu's and your Fedoras. It may work on the Arches or something like that, but yeah. If you're sticking to the main ones, you'll probably be just fine. If you're not, if you're running Arch, you can probably figure out how to get it installed. All right. So either way, if you've worn out your trial, go get the player. It will work just fine. It will look slightly different, but it will work just fine. If you need help installing it, please let me know. I'm going to put it on this machine after. I'm doing a reset on it. That way I have a fresh box. I haven't touched this box in a while. I usually don't need Windows for any reason. This week is not that week. All right. So when you're getting your first VM done, this week we're going to be installing Windows Server 2012 R2. To do that, it is fairly simple. Here is a video that will walk you through how to do that. And again, if this video, you're not happy with it for any reason whatsoever, just come back into WebEx or email me, tell me that you'd rather me do it or something like that. I'm happy to do that for you as well. So just let me know. But this video will show you how to install a VM, specifically a Windows VM. I think in the video they do Windows 10, but the Windows Server 2012 install is, yeah, it's almost the exact same thing. There won't be much difference. So the quiz is a little different this time. I noticed nobody's taken it yet, which is great, because this quiz is actually easier if you do it after the lab. So definitely look at these resources. This one's a really quick PDF. Basically, gives you the backstory to VMware, where it came from, what kind of cool features it has, all of that kind of stuff. So do skim that one for sure. This one, I do not require you to read it. This thing is massive. It is absolutely massive. If you are familiar with, on Windows, it'll be Control F. If you are familiar with that key combo, then, yeah, I don't need to tell you much more. If you are not familiar with Control F, then what you need to do is, it's Command F on a Mac, but Control F likely for you. You can do that. One of the features that we talk about a lot in VMware is, at least on the desktop, is Unity. You're going to see that come up a few times this week. So if you want to know facts about Unity, Control F and search for it. Likely you'll find the very first instance of it, and right here. Set preferences for Unity mode. Either that, or you can just keep going. Keep searching through. So Control F on a PDF or really any document in Windows will give you the find feature, and it will find any instance of whatever it is that you're typing. So if you want to find specifically Unity mode, you'll do that. There are fewer instances of Unity mode. I think there were 60 of Unity and only 46 instances of Unity mode. Use this. The reason I'm telling you this, mostly because I really honestly think in IT, this is us. This is what we do. I don't know that I've ever read an entire full release note or guide or anything like this. I mean, this thing is, how many pages? Like too many, 321. So I do not expect you to read this. But I do expect you to have it available so that you can search it like this. This is probably one of the most valuable skills that I have ever gotten. So if you haven't figured it out yet, if you haven't done search yet, this may just change your life. I don't know. It certainly changed mine. So anyway, things like this. This is the kind of thing that is going to pop up in your quiz, right? You can't switch to Unity mode when the virtual machine is paused. There will be questions like that in your quiz about what Unity mode is, how it works, things like that. And then everything else as well. Like if you're looking for 32-bit, that's specifically talking about color depth. But you can see what types of things it actually supports. And just keep going down the list, right? Until you find what it is that you want. So anyhow, yeah, again, this one, the using VMware Workstation Pro, VMware Workstation, whatever this is, yeah, the user guide. Don't read that, search it. That will come in so handy in your quiz. Release notes are a lot shorter. It's another something that you can just skim, just to give you an idea of what it is that you actually need to run this kind of thing. But it is 4 pages. I mean, hey, you can do a search on here as well. So those documents, have them open. They come in really handy. Oh, what? I'm over here closing the wrong windows. They come in really handy when you're going through your quiz. But again, remember, if you go through your lab before you go through your quiz, a lot of the things that come out of the that are going to show up on the quiz just happen to be, as you're walking through the lab, you're going to run into a lot of the things. Unity mode is one of them. So before, I mean, we're really, it's a bunch of multiple choice questions. Let me verify how many we got. 25 questions. You got an hour to do it. That gives you a little over 2 minutes a question. Don't forget, you have 2 attempts and the grade's average. So if you, like I said before, if you get a 50 and then you come back again, take it again, you get 100, your average will be a 75. So shoot for the stars on the first one, and if you get yourself an A, you can probably just leave it alone. You don't have to take that second chance. That is not required, only if you want to raise your grade just by a little bit. All right, so the lab. The lab is a lot. Get started on it as soon as you possibly can. And not a lot because, well, it's just a lot to do. None of it is really particularly difficult, but you've got to actually go through the motions to make all of this stuff work. So get started on this as soon as you possibly can. Installing VMware Workstation, as you're going to see, right? Log on to your Windows host. This is just your desktop. Open up Google Docs or another word processor, name it. I mean, I'm not really going to be that much of a stickler here to the naming. Moodle's really just going to show me what it is. And then, drop all your snips into one document. This is really where this downloaded folder is going to come in really handy. So the folder that you were meant to download last week has all of the stuff that you need in it this week. Let me see. Is it here? It is, yeah, course docs. And, oh, no, wrong one. Not course docs. Files. So the operating system that we're going to install this week is Server 2012 R2 eval. That ISO and the software that you need was in that as well. If you did not, or if for some reason you downloaded it, you thought you had everything, but you don't have everything yet, you need to come in here and get Workstation 14. It's still here. I didn't take it down or anything like that. Back to Unit 1, you'll find the link to get here. And just come back in and download this stuff. So not a problem. It's still open. All right. Again, you don't need 2019, so you don't necessarily have to download that. But if you're adventurous enough, I don't necessarily mind if you use 2019 in place of 2012 R2. The class is getting a little long in the tooth. I think Karen mentioned last semester we're planning on redoing the entire class anyway. That's still on the books. Just hasn't come to fruition yet because everything's crazy. I mean, you know this. You're sitting at home. Stuff is not going according to plan. I promise you that. Oops. I just get to closing stuff. All right. So anyway, throughout the lab, install VMware Workstation. The instructions are quite spot on for just about everything. Let me see. The second lab. Oh, well, I passed it. Oh yeah, the second lab is creating an actual virtual machine. You don't really do much in it. You will. Oh, let me see. Where's that first window? It doesn't have a picture of the window. Anyway, so you'll create a new one. Come in here. This is going to be Microsoft Windows, and as it shows down here, 2012, and you just work your way through the instructions. This location is showing ITNW1313 VMs. The reason you'll change this right here is just simply so that you can find them later on to clone them and find the snapshots and all of that other stuff, because you'll be required to find that. So do not skip that step. If you do skip that step, it's not the end of the world. You will have to go into the VM and verify where all this stuff is being saved. Otherwise, yeah, it's going to be tough. But if you need help with that, if you skip that on accident or something like that, and need help with that, please let me know. I'm happy to do that. Now, this is one of those tricky times where you can give it one. I mean, everybody's just got one, but you need to give it the number of cores. This is very different depending on who you are and what kind of hardware you have. In this laptop that I'm running right now, I've got 4 cores, but in the Windows laptop that I'll be using to show you guys how to do this stuff, I only have 2. So this would not work for me. This would have to be cranked down to 2. So what you'll need to do is in Windows, find out exactly how many cores you have on your system. If you need help finding out how that works or what that is, let me know. I'll walk you through how to figure out what CPU you've got and all of that. But if you go into Device Manager and open up Processors, it'll give you the ID, the model number of your CPU. You can use that to just look it up on the Intel website. Really, if you got like an i5-8550U or something like that, just look that up. It'll the first thing that you find is going to be the Intel website anyway, and that will help you decipher whether or not you need 4, 2, 1, whatever. 2 is usually pretty standard. You know, even if you have 4 cores and you put 2 in here, it's not going to hurt you. If you have 2 cores and put 2 in here, also not going to hurt you. So 2 is just a relatively safe number for most machines. If I had to just totally guess for you, you say you don't know what CPU you have, you don't know how many cores you have, you know, whatever. If you put 2 in there, you're likely safe. Here's another one. Another one of those things to watch out for. These VMs, at least in Player 16, tended to default to 4 gigs of RAM. Not everybody has 8 or more gigs of RAM on their machine. So if this is you, if you're running on like 4 gigs of RAM for your whole system, number 1, I am sorry. Number 2, I can help you with an upgrade. And number 3, make sure this is not set to 4 gigs. Using up your the entirety of all of your system RAM for one VM does not make a good experience. It will likely not blue screen on you or anything like that, but there's a good chance everything is going to slow down to a crawl, and you're going to wonder why it feels like Windows is just installing about 100 updates. Yeah. So if you have 4 gigs of RAM, I have no problem with you cranking this down to 2 gigs or even further. Windows Server doesn't like much less than 2 gigs, but I've gotten by giving it 1.5 gigs. It will work on 1.5 gigs if you're really hurting for space. But I would recommend, if this is you, right, if you're running 4 gigs of RAM, then when you're running a VM, let that really be the only VM you're running. Chrome is a RAM hog. That makes this really difficult. That makes this kind of a very intricate dance, because you need Chrome to see stuff, and you need your VM to be running so you can get the lab done. Right, if you're in Chrome, don't have like 8 YouTube videos going, watching Twitch and all other kinds of stuff happening at the same time, right? Keep it very slim while you're running your VM, so your VM doesn't struggle nearly as much. But again, that only applies to those of you that have very little RAM to spare. 8 gigs or more, you're probably safe to just stick with the defaults and not worry too much about it. But again, Windows Server 2012, 2 gigs is perfectly fine. Let me see. What else? What other kind of pitfalls? Oh, yeah. Disk size. Well, actually, so the networking is a little weird. Typically, by default, networking is use NAT. I don't mind if you just leave it this way. Reason for that is when you leave it here, your Windows machine will have internet access, which means, though, that it will automatically reach out and try to grab Windows updates. So if you don't mind a little excess background noise in your VM, then leave it here on NAT. If you otherwise use host-only networking, basically this is just going to put the VM on its own little network. So think about if you grabbed a switch off of a rack, plugged it into the wall, and then plugged your machine up to that switch. All right, nothing on that switch is going anywhere other than local. That's exactly what's happening right here. Right, until you plug a router into that switch, nothing's happening, right? And of course, figure out DHCP and all these other things, get your gateway configured, right? So if you don't mind having internet and a little bit of background noise, then leave it on NAT. Otherwise, host-only networking. For those of you that have 4 gigs of RAM, yeah, this is probably what you want, so you can actually get around your VM. Everything else, leave as default there, and disk size. You can get away with as little as 40 gigs. So one of the cool things about VMware is its ability to dynamically scale these storage devices. So really what that means is if you put 100 gigs in this box and you tell the VM, hey, I want you to have a disk of 100 gigs, when you click next, there's not a 100 gig file on your machine. So the way that these storage things work is basically when you click next, a file is created. And usually it's about a megabyte right at the very beginning. Before you ever use it, it's about a megabyte. When you start up your machine and begin the installation process, that 1 megabyte file will grow to only the size that it needs to grow to function. So right after you're done with your Windows installation, that file is likely only about 8-9 gigs, not 100. And that file, the file I'm referring to is the virtual hard disk, right? This is the virtual disk that your VM will use, same as your C drive on your laptop. So your virtual machine will see a file instead of a disk, but it won't be any the wiser. It won't notice a difference. It will treat it as a disk, just like your computer treats your physical disk as a disk. But the big difference there is that, yeah, just because we set it 100 gigs doesn't mean it is 100 gigs. So don't go scrambling on your machine. If you have 98 gigabytes free on your disk, don't worry about it yet. Only if the VM grows that big will you ever have to worry about a file that big. But additionally, there's nothing wrong with going a little smaller than this. Just to be on the safe side, you got 99 gigs free, but you want to be safe. You want to put 50 gigs here. That way, there's not a question of whether or not it will fill up your disk. It will not, right? It will only fill up 50 gigs of your disk, and that's a potential, right? Only when you're dumping a bunch of files into your VM and playing with it a lot will you run into a situation where it's actually going to use all 50 gigs. Most of the VMs that I've run in my classes, these things only get up to about 20 gigs. And 90% of that is Windows updates. So if you do the host only up here, you'll miss a lot of that. You'll miss a lot of that size. Yeah, the VM will likely hover around 15, 20 gigs or something like that once all is said and done. So not a big deal. If you check this box, however, this is the kicker. If you check that box, there will be a 100 gig file plopped onto your drive. So be aware that's how that's going to work. Just leave that box unchecked, and it will grow to the size that you need and no larger. All right. What do we got next? And that's pretty much it. Yeah, you just create the VM there. Activity 3 is actually, checking out the Virtual Machine Administrative Console. This is going to be a pretty straightforward lab. No real pitfalls to worry about. It's very short. And same with this one. Working with the Administrative Console, you're going in, and really all this is just getting into the preferences of VMware and learning how they work and how to change them. Right? Like this is a really important feature. This will show you where all your VMs are going to be stored. Right? So if you make a mistake earlier in the lab, where if you miss that point where it tells you, hey, change it to CITW 1313 VMs, whatever. That way, that's where all your VMs are stored. If you miss that, you can come in here and use this lab activity 4, to fix it. So really, this is just tinkering with preferences. Now is when you get to the actual thing that you might have to hurry up and wait. Right? This is one of those activities that it might take a little while, depending on how fast your disk is, how much RAM you have, and what else you're doing on the machine. We're actually going to install Windows Server 2012 on this one. Very disk intensive. So take a step back. If you have a hard disk, a spinning disk in your laptop or desktop that you're using for this class, then it will take a while. Good chance it might take anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes to get the installation fully done. So this is that hurry up and wait scenario, right? Where you next through it, and you get to the point where it's actually installing, you might give it some time. If you're on an SSD, anything faster than a spinning disk, really, you can expect to wait anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. Not very CPU intensive, not very RAM intensive, the installations. It's very disk intensive. So be aware of that. But again, as long as you have the files that you downloaded from Google Drive, then this lab will go pretty smoothly. It's gonna have you go in and add the CD DVD to the drive. You're gonna add the ISO to the drive, so it'll boot from it. It'll have you go into a basic BIOS, so you can change the boot order. Now, to be quite honest, this step is extra, but it's good to know how to get into this so that you can change it later on. If for some reason you need to reinstall within the same VM, this skill will come in handy, being able to get to the BIOS of these VMs. So don't skip any of these steps, but some of these steps will just not really have an effect on the end result. Now this, please do not miss this. This will, if you choose the Server Core Edition, so notice there's going to be 4. Squint with me just a little bit. There's going to be 4. Standard Edition, Data Center Edition. To be quite honest with you, it doesn't matter if you go Standard or Data Center. What really matters is this. Do not choose Server Core at all. Those 2 options are not for this lab. Server Core is a style of Windows Server that removes the GUI out of it so that you can control it remotely. That is not for you. You are going to be clicking around in your VM, and without a GUI, that's kind of hard to do. Luckily for us, though, in Server 2012 R2, there is a command in the GUI a command in the command line that will install the GUI. But Server 2016, Server 2019, and every server after that has removed that feature. So if you were one of the adventurous ones that used 2019, there's no way to get back. You will have to reinstall the entire operating system. And do you remember what I said right up here about getting into the BIOS and learning those features? Yeah, if you accidentally choose Server Core, install it, and when you log in, just a command prompt comes up and nothing else, you made the mistake. You installed Server Core. You'll need to reinstall. So make sure on your first pass through, you are choosing server with and I know it doesn't say it, but if you take this little thing here, make that a little bit bigger again. If you take this little bar and scooch it over a little bit, it's going to say server with a GUI. GUI. That is the one you want. If you do not do that, you will have a rough time as you go on, and you will find you will need to just reinstall. So don't skip it. Server with a GUI, server with a GUI. Doesn't really matter to me which one you do, just server with a GUI. All right. Everything else is pretty self-explanatory. I mean, to be honest with you, this whole entire process, besides this right here, is a next kind of operation. And then this is the part. When you see this screen, SSDs, 5 to 15 minutes. Spinning disks, 20 to 30 minutes or so. It may be a little quicker than that because servers tend to be a little more stripped down than Windows 10. But let's just suffice it to say, it's going to be a little bit longer on your hard disk. So if you know that you don't have an SSD or you don't know one way or the other, just prepare for 20 to 30 minutes. And if it takes longer than a half hour, yeah. If it's taking longer than an hour, I would say give it 1 hour total. If it takes longer than 1 hour, then we may need to start over. Email me, ask questions, let me know, and we can figure it out. All right. Yep. Once it finishes, you'll need to do Control-Delete. Yes. And then let me see. Install VMware tools. This is a good one. This is going to be a really good thing that you need to do. You're going to have to do this one for the next lab, which is the Unity thing. I'll explain that when we get there. Anyway, VMware tools are super duper easy to install. If you have in your PC hardware class installed a driver for a video card or a sound card or a network card, Windows tends to have these things built in most of the time. But discrete video cards tend to require a manual driver install of some kind. If you've ever done that in your entire life, even in lab or whatever, you can handle this activity. That's all this is. You'll insert, right here, this step. You basically insert another ISO into your VM, and it shows up like a DVD or a CD drive, CD in Windows. You'll open this up and run it, and it'll just basically take you through a next kind of driver install. Actually, really good case in point. If you've ever installed anything, if you've ever reinstalled Windows on a Dell laptop, you can go to Dell.com and download all the things that you need to get the most up-to-date drivers. That is quite literally the type of install I'm talking about. Double-click it, it extracts, next, finish, done. Then you reboot because, well, Windows, and you should be good. So this will be no different. As you next on through it and get finished, it will tell you you need a reboot. And that's because it does install a graphics driver, speaking of. That way you can actually see everything on your screen. You can do resizing. You can change display. You can even do some of the really cool features of this. And one of the reasons that you might want to use VMware over other solutions is that drag and drop. If you need to move files from your desktop, your actual physical desktop, to the VM itself, say you've got an executable that you want to run on the server, or you've got files that you need to add to the web page that your VM is running, or something like that, it is super simple once you get these VMware tools installed to just drag the file, no joke, just from your desktop into the VM, drop it in there, and the VM has it. It takes no time at all. Just enough time to, same as if you did a Control-C on that file and then went into a different directory and Control-V'd it. So if it was like a 4 gig file, it'll take a minute, but it will get there, and it will be very quick overall. So anyway, that one's very quick. Yeah, this is really only 9 steps. One more before we get to, or maybe 2 more before we get to the Unity. Adding a hard disk. This is pretty important, especially for Windows servers. A lot of times when you're running a Windows server, there's a good chance that you're probably running a share. It may be administrative only, where only admins can get to it or something like that. So we have a place to put tools on the server, but from a remote location that doesn't have access to the VM. Something like that, right? That will be a good example of why you would need a second disk. So add it, do the whole Windows file sharing thing to it. You should have covered that in operating systems. It's no different in the server. Everything that you do on on Windows 10, you do the same thing on a server. It's really not that much different. The server does give you some nicer tools. Server Manager does have a way to do file shares that is not the same as Windows 10, and does give you a few more options as well. It really exposes storage spaces. One of the ways that Windows is trying to go with their multi-disk setups. If you've touched Linux at all, Linux has kind of had this idea with MDATM or their ButterFS or ZFS file systems. You can do some funky stuff with disks. So those kinds of ideas have been around for a while and introduced in Windows Server 2012. So they've been around in both operating systems for quite a while. 'while. 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 'whi so that you have more redundancy, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, so what we're going to do here is add in a second disk. So we had our 100 gig or whatever you set it to. I don't mind. And actually, you can see inside of here, you can see current size is only 7 gigs. That's the idea. So anyway, we're going to add one of these. You'll come down here, click on the add button, and it'll ask you, well, what do you want to add? And as you follow these steps, you will add a new disk, and you'll get to choose how big it is. It looks like 40 gigs is what we're looking for in the lab. That's actually a pretty good number, so you can leave it that way. We're not going to use it much, so it won't grow beyond probably 1 gig. So it's likely that number is not going to make too much of a difference for you. But just follow the instructions on that one. 100's a little big, 40 is right about right. So when you get into Windows, you're going to have to go through a couple of things and bring that disk online. When you hit Disk Management, this is what you're going to see. The first thing it's going to ask you, when you open up Disk Management, it's going to say, hey, I see a new disk. What do you want to do with it? And, I mean, honestly, the only thing you can do with it is initialize it. You can cancel. Don't. But if you do cancel, you can right-click in this black space, and you should be able to initialize it from there. And anyway, so make sure the disk is checked. MBR is fine. Click OK. And looks like this lab wants it to be a dynamic disk, so do that. The color up here will change from black to a tan olive color. Dynamic disks look that way. Simple volumes have this dark blue color. So be prepared. You'll see olive. It's not a bad thing. And anyway, you're gonna split that into two volumes, 20 gigs each. Anyway, most of that is just going to be follow the instructions and you'll get it right. If for some reason, like I said, you have issues with it, please let me know. Unity. So as I was mentioning, you can do some really cool stuff, drag and drop and all these kinds of cool features after you install the VMware tools. Unity is no different, but you have to have the VMware tools installed. If you don't, this is going to not be great for you. If for some reason Unity is not working or it tells you that your VMware tools are not installed, go back to the activity where you install VMware tools and run through it one more time. It may just be that you didn't reboot. So after you install the VMware tools, you have to reboot, otherwise they won't enable. They are drivers and they have to be loaded, and the only way to load them in Windows is reboot. So reboot after you install that. That way Activity 8 will be just fine. But Unity mode is pretty interesting. Let me see if I can find a good screenshot of it. Nope. Really what it does, it becomes really apparent if you are running in a Mac or if you're running in Linux. When you go into Unity mode, it makes the thing full screen and it tries to integrate it into your operating system. So like if we were doing this on a Mac, you would see, I would have to use VMware Fusion. I can't use Workstation. But if we were to do this on a Mac, you would see the Windows taskbar down here, just as you would on a Windows system. It would show up down here. You click on it, the start menu comes up. Any program that you launch, it just looks, it's going to launch right on my desktop, just like it would look if I were running Windows. So Unity is a really cool feature, but it's only for folks that, it tends to be mostly just for folks that don't need to know that they're running in a VM, or would just like, full screen without any kind of no compromise, right? They want it to look like Windows, period. That's really it. What? Did I close it? I did not. Come on, Mac. I know you can handle it. There it is. Okay. Nope. It's the wrong one, of course. There. Okay, found it. Sometimes I really hate Mac. This is one of those times. Anyway, that's the deal. You're going to launch Notepad, and it's going to look like Notepad is running in your system. One way to identify it, though, is that Server 2012 has this really light blue color, and that's not going to match the rest of your system. The rest of your system is likely a black title bar or white title bar, depending on the theme that you chose. But, right, this is going to look out of place, but it's supposed to. But it does look like it's running on your actual machine, which is kind of nifty. All right. So as you go through it, you're basically going to save, and as you save, you'll see all the server stuff and not your own desktop. So another dead giveaway that it's the VM and not your actual desktop. Yeah, the look will give it away, but also as you go through this, you'll see a bunch of different hints that this ain't the same. Snapshots, fantastic tool. By the way, and this is going to go for the rest of for the rest of everything, everything that you do in this particular class. Snapshots are going to be a part of it. So snapshots are a quick way to take and I hesitate to say backup because it's not a backup. It's kind of like a moment in time. So let's say that you install Windows and you get it configured all the way that you want it to be. You have the icons in the right spot. You've installed your favorite browser. You got the games on there, whatever you want on a VM. You take a snapshot at that point. And basically what that does is remembers everything that you have done. It remembers where the icons are. It remembers what was installed. It remembers everything. And the cool thing about that is that let's say you go for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks and you make tons and tons and tons of changes. But that last change that you made, you decided you thought configuring some registry entries by hand was a good idea. It's not. You do that and you realize you bork your entire system, right? You reboot and it's like, I don't want to boot anymore. The cool thing about these snapshots is that this really allows you to roll back. It will, if you took a snapshot right when you got it the way that you wanted, then when you roll back to that snapshot, as you will do here, then you'll realize that your computer or your VM is back into a working state just the way that you left it right at the moment that you took that snapshot. So snapshots are fantastic. I will recommend that you take them. Anytime you're about to do something, you're not sure what the outcome is going to be. Right before you start, take a snapshot. They do use disk space, but they only use as much disk space as the stuff that you've changed. So let's say that you got your machine the way that you want it. You take a snapshot. That initial snapshot doesn't take up much space because really what it's doing is just taking stock of all the things that have changed on the disk since the last time. Well, there was no last time. This is the first snapshot. So it just remembers the way that the disk is configured now. So let's say you add 2 gigs worth of files, but you don't do anything else. And then you immediately take a snapshot. That snapshot will be about 2 gigs because the only thing that changed on the disk is those files. So the snapshot only takes into account what has changed. So you'll have your 40 gig disk that you installed with your VM. Take that initial snapshot, not very big. You add 2 gigs of stuff, take another snapshot. That snapshot will be 2 gigs because of the difference, or you'll hear the word delta a lot when it comes to this. The delta, the change, the difference between the two. Anyway, so this activity is going to take you through how to do all that. Let me see. And really not a lot to it. Yeah, nothing I need to bring to your attention. And all right, so activity 10 is sharing virtual machine files in shared folders. If you were able to complete Unity, you'll be able to complete this one. This one also relies on the VMware tools, but I've seen some funky stuff where after some Windows updates, and this is for y'all that left NAT on, and if you chose to install those updates, I've seen where VMware tools just, I don't know, they just decide to take a dump on you and do not work after a certain set of Windows updates. So if that happens to you, if you do updates between installing the VMware tools and doing this activity, and for some reason this activity is just giving you, this is not, you're not having a good time with it, reinstall the VMware tools. Go back to that activity, walk through it, install everything, reboot, try activity 10 again, and that will likely fix you up. If for some reason you installed VMware tools a couple times and it's just not working, then get with me and we'll figure it out. Let me see. Yep. This one's going to be fairly quick. There are just a lot of steps on it. Oh, there it was. There's just a lot of steps on it, so just make sure you're following the steps. There's nothing else really to worry about. Just make sure your VMware tools are installed. I think this is the last one. And this is what I'm talking about. There's a lot to do. None of it is particularly difficult, though, as long as you follow the instructions. And Anyway, sharing virtual machine files with a mapped virtual disk. Really, what this is you're able to just stuff files into a virtual disk, which is really interesting. Anyway, let me see. Anything you need to worry about? No. Just follow the instructions on that one. You should be good to go. Okay. I think 12 is the last one. Okay, seriously. 12 is seriously the last one. Cloning your VM. This is extremely cool. What a lot of times, a lot of reasons that you might want a clone of a VM is that you're going to be doing some system level changes that you don't want to replicate out, or you just want to test. So one of the cool things you can do with this is clone a VM. So you have a VM. So if you look on the screen, you can see underneath my computer, you can see that VM. That's the Windows Server VM back behind there. And when you clone it, you're going to get a second one. There will be a second one of these that you can make changes to. So this would allow you to, let's say when you clone it, you name it Windows Server 2012 clone or test pod or testing or test VM, or it doesn't matter what you name it. You can now add 6 disks to it, play around with it, see if you can install some kind of funky driver that allows Windows to use different file system types or something like that. System level stuff. When you do that, and you do it in your test VM, nothing happens to your original VM, the VM that you cloned. That one stays just fine. Doesn't make any changes, doesn't break. Let's say you blow up your clone of a VM, nothing happens to your initial VM. So it's a way to give yourself a sandbox to play around with, or it's quite literally a way to have a one-to-one backup. So if you just need a backup of that VM. Let's say that you are afraid that particular VM, or it's just been giving you trouble, right? Like it's going to give you a blue screen. You've run into a situation where it's been giving you some over the past couple of weeks. You might just want to clone it that way. If one goes down, you can bring the other one up immediately, something like that. And it makes backing things up way easier. So anyway, you're going to clone the VM and just walk through that. Really, all you're getting is a secondary version, a second exact clone of your VM. I mean, clone is the right word. It's quite literally an identical twin to your VM that will be stored right next to it. All right. So after you're done with all of this, save all this stuff. If you're in Google Drive, you don't have to actually save. It all saves for you, and then upload your submission. I should have added it in here, but in the lab itself, it does mention PDF. So in Google Drive, just one more example, which is one more show for my show and tell. In a Google Doc, and same goes with Word if you're using Word, or LibreOffice if you're using LibreOffice. It doesn't matter to me what you use. Whatever you're using, there is an export option in Office and in LibreOffice. In Google Drive, it's called download. But what I want you to do is export or download as PDF. Get all your snips, snaps, snapshots, snoop shots. Get them all into this one document. Download that. And that's what I'm looking for. So that's what I need you to come into Unit 2 Lab Submission to and upload. So send me that, please. And if my internet would cooperate with me. The quiz. So as I mentioned, it's going to be a little easier on your brain, if you do the quiz after the lab. A lot of the things in the quiz do come up in the lab. And the rest of it's just going to come from this intro. Oh, that's misspelled. I'll fix that. Introduction. I should say introduction. Introduction to VMware Workstation and the user guide. The user guide. These two documents are going to have pretty much every answer for the quiz. So remember, on the user guide, Control F or Command F if you're on a Mac. Those of you that are sitting in here in WebEx, you obviously know where this link is. But for those of you that haven't but want to, or want to come in during my office hours later on in the day or on Thursday, click this link and sign in. If WebEx is not your thing, email me, hang out me, do all of that. So last little thing we got this week, and this will be quick because that's it. That's it. Basically, what I'm asking of you is, let me see, blah blah blah. Here we go. This is the real question. What we want in this particular case is that, the case project is basically you've got a computer, students sit at this computer, and you want to be able to create a way for a student to easily start new labs. So this is going to, as mentioned in here, you're going to take snapshots and cloning and kind of take that to fruition, right? So after you install the system, when would be the best place to take a snapshot? When would be the best place to take a clone? For instance, say you have 3 activities. It says 4 units. So let's say 4 activities. You've got 4 activities planned in the class, and you want students to be able to just sit down at the desk, pick the activity they want, and move forward with the activity. What is the best way to do that? Is cloning the best way? Can you do that entire thing just with cloning? Do you need snapshots? Would snapshots provide all you need, or do you need some kind of mixture of the two? So in this, for instance, just assume none of the units have anything to do with each other. They are 4 totally separate things that you want to get done that have nothing to do with each other. And really what I'm getting at with that is that it's going to push you closer to the clone side of things rather than the snapshot side of things. But just a pro tip, mixture is really what you want. So really what I'm digging into is what kind of mixture. How exactly do you think this would work the best? Now, while I won't say there are no wrong answers. If you're way out in left field, right, you could totally be wrong. But, you can get away with a lot of stuff here. You can get away with a pure snapshot style fix for this particular project. But really what I'm looking for is how you think that works. What would that work? How would that work in the scenario that you're putting together? The explanation of how it works is way more important to me than, I've got 1 clone and 70 snapshots, or I've got 7 snapshots and 7 clones. That is less important than what you're going to do with those snapshots and what you're going to do with those clones. So as long as you can give me a good explanation or a good, walk me through what that is, and if you can give me a good idea of what you're talking about, then yeah, that's pretty much all I'm really looking for. I'm not going to count out for grammar or anything like that, but if it's unreadable, if I can't read it, then yeah, I'll really just ask you to fluff it up a little bit, make it readable, and resubmit, rather than just giving you a blanket 0 or something like that. I'm not really into doing that. I'd rather you go through it a few times and learn something at the end of it than just not get the chance to do it or not get the chance to improve. Improvement's what we're all about, or what I'm all about anyway. So yeah. Anyway, fairly straightforward. Give me the answer, mix of clone and snapshots, and tell me how you're going to do it. That's really the idea with that. And then once you're done, do that in Google Drive, Office, Libre, I don't care. Just download it as, or export it as a PDF, and upload that bad boy right here. So that will do it. That's all you got to do. Do the lab first, then the quiz, and then the case project. Get all that stuff done. You are done for the week. Do not forget, I'll be coming back. I'm going to stick around for about 45 more minutes till 12 o'clock for now. And then I'll come back again at 2 o'clock. This video should be out by then. I don't know if you're really keeping a hawk eye on the class. You'll see the video come up before lunch. And, if you get it watched or whatever, then this will actually make sense to you. I'll be back at 2. If you're watching this after 2 o'clock, well, I was here at 2. Otherwise, if you miss me today, please come back on Thursday, or please email me so that we can get together and figure out, what went wrong or whatever you need. If you have questions, please get in touch with me, and we'll get that taken care of. Otherwise, that'll do it. I'll stop the recording here.